Welcome to ZoomInData. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining this detailed session on testing Azure Functions. We will cover unit testing, mocking triggers and bindings, testing frameworks, in-memory hosting, HTTP and timer triggers, durable functions testing, integration testing, isolated worker model, concurrency, performance, C automation, the testing pyramid, and best practices to ensure reliable, high-quality functions. If you are preparing for certification, an interview, or building production-grade Azure Functions, this session will give you clear, ready-to-use knowledge. If you find it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData for more Azure deep dives. Let us begin. How do you unit test Azure Functions? Unit testing Azure Functions involves isolating the function code from triggers, bindings, and external services. Write tests for the core business logic using standard frameworks like XUnit, NUnit, or MSTest. Mock dependencies, iLogger, bindings, SDK clients, to focus on the function's behavior. Use in-memory or test doubles for triggers and bindings. Avoid calling real Azure services in unit tests. Explain XUnit or NUnit for .NET functions. XUnit and NUnit are popular .NET testing frameworks. Both work excellently for Azure Functions unit tests. XUnit uses fact and theory attributes for simple and parameterized tests. It is lightweight and modern. NUnit uses test and test case. It offers rich assertions and parallel test execution. Choose XUnit for clean syntax and NUnit for advanced features. Both integrate well with Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. How do you mock triggers and bindings? Mock triggers by passing fake input data directly to your function code. Avoid using real triggers in unit tests. Mock bindings with interfaces or test doubles. Create a fake I collector less than T greater than or I async collector less than T greater than for output bindings. Use MOQ or N substitute to mock SDK clients, Cosmos client, Blob client, etc., injected via DI. This isolates the function logic and makes tests fast and deterministic. What is Functions? Test Helper. Functions. Test Helper is a community library, Microsoft, Azure, WebJobs, extensions, tests, common, that simplifies testing. It provides in-memory host builders and test context objects for triggers and bindings. Use it to simulate function execution without a real functions host. It is especially useful for testing bindings and trigger metadata in unit tests. Explain in-memory hosting for testing. In-memory hosting runs the function's runtime entirely in memory. No real Azure storage or network calls. Use Test Host Builder or Functions Host Builder to create an in-memory functions host for integration tests. Configure Storage Emulator or in-memory storage for durable functions testing. This approach tests the full function pipeline, triggers, bindings, middleware, without external dependencies. How do you test HTTP triggers? Test HTTP triggers by calling the function method directly with a fake HTTP request data object. Use HTTP request data factory to create mock requests with headers, query strings, and body. Verify HTTP response data status code, headers, and body in assertions. For isolated model, test the ASP.NET Core middleware pipeline if used. What is the Azure Functions testing framework? There is no single official Azure Functions testing framework. Microsoft provides guidance and helpers. Use XUnit, NUnit plus Functions. Test helper for unit tests. Use in-memory host, Microsoft. Azure Functions. Worker. Test host, for integration tests in isolated model. Combine with Azure SDK testing libraries for mocking Cosmos, storage, etc. How do you test durable functions? Use the Durable Functions Test SDK, Microsoft. Azure WebJobs. Extensions. Durable Task. Test, for unit testing orchestrators and activities. Mock activity calls and external events in test code, simulate timeouts and retries. Test orchestration history replay by asserting expected sequence of events. Run integration tests against local storage emulator or real Azure storage. Explain integration testing with storage emulator. The Azure Storage Emulator, Azurite, runs locally and emulates blob, queue, and table storage. Configure durable functions to use Azurite connection string for testing. Run full integration tests, triggers, bindings, orchestrations, against the emulator. Azurite is faster and more reliable than old storage emulator. Use it for C pipelines. How do you test bindings? Test input bindings by providing mock data in test context or fake input objects. Test output bindings by capturing the output collector and asserting added items. Use functions. Test helper to simulate binding behavior in memory. Avoid real Azure services. Mock SDK clients or use in-memory doubles. What is the role of MOQ for dependencies? MOQ is a popular mocking library for .NET. It creates fake objects for dependencies. Mock iLogger, Cosmos client, HTTP client, or binding interfaces in unit tests. Verify calls and set return values. Example: mock setup x equals greater than x. Get async returns async data. Keeps tests fast and isolated from external services. How do you test timer triggers? Call the timer triggered function directly. Pass a fake timer info object. Mock timer info with desired schedule and is passed due values. Assert function behavior based on timer state. Example: run cleanup when past due. Test scheduling logic separately if using cron expressions. Explain load testing functions. Load testing simulates high concurrent invocations to measure performance and scaling. Use Azure load testing or tools like JMeter, K6, or Locust. Target HTTP endpoints or trigger queues with high message volume. Monitor concurrency, latency, errors, and scaling behavior in application insights. How do you test isolated worker functions? Use Microsoft Azure Functions Worker Test Host for in-memory isolated worker testing. Create a test host with mock services and bindings. Invoke functions directly and assert results and side effects. Test middleware, DI, and HTTP pipeline in isolation. What is the difference between unit and integration tests? Unit tests isolate the function code, mock triggers, bindings, and dependencies. Integration tests run the full pipeline, real or emulated triggers and bindings. Unit tests are fast and focused. Integration tests verify end-to-end behavior. Use both. Unit for logic, integration for bindings and runtime interactions. How do you test custom handlers? Run the custom handler locally as an HTTP server on a fixed port. Send sample trigger JSON payloads using curl or Postman. Verify response JSON format, status code, and outputs. Deploy to staging and test with real triggers before production. Explain testing retry policies. Test retry policies by simulating failures in mocked dependencies. Use MOQ to throw exceptions on first attempts and succeed on retries. Assert correct number of retries and back off delays. Test both built-in retry and custom retry logic in orchestrators. How do you test error handling? Simulate exceptions in activities, bindings, or external calls. Verify function returns correct error response or logs exception. Test retry, compensation, or dead letter behavior in durable functions. Use assertions on logs and output bindings for error cases. What is the role of approval tests? Approval tests capture expected output and compare against current output. Use approval tests library. Run once to approve output, then fail on changes. Great for testing complex JSON responses or binding outputs. Helps catch unintended changes during refactoring. How do you test concurrency? Simulate concurrent calls using Azure load testing or parallel test runners. Monitor concurrent executions in Application Insights or Azure Monitor. Test singleton locks. Ensure only one instance runs at a time. Verify ID impotency and thread safety in shared state or resources. Explain testing with Application Insights. Enable Application Insights in test environment. Capture telemetry. Assert on traces, requests, dependencies, and exceptions in tests. Use custom events for business assertions, e.g., order processed. Validate performance metrics like duration and failure rate. How do you automate tests in C? Use GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, or other C tools to run XUnit, NUnit tests. Run unit tests on every commit, fast and isolated. Run integration tests against Azure emulator in CI pipeline. Fail build on test failures. Enforce quality before deployment. What is the best testing pyramid for functions? Bottom. Unit tests for core logic. Fast, isolated, many tests. Middle. Integration tests for bindings and triggers. Fewer, use emulator. Top. End-to-end, load tests. Few, validate real-world behavior. Aim for 70% unit, 20% integration, 10% end-to-end, load. How do you test performance? Use Azure load testing to simulate high concurrent invocations. Measure P99 latency, throughput, and error rate in Application Insights. Test cold starts with repeated invocations after idle time. Compare plans, consumption versus premium, for latency and scaling. Best practices for testing Azure Functions. Write unit tests for business logic, mock triggers, bindings, and SDKs. Use integration tests with Azure emulator for bindings and triggers. Make all functions idempotent and deterministic, essential for replay. Test error paths, retries, timeouts, and concurrency scenarios. Automate tests in CI, fail builds on test failures. Enable Application Insights in all environments for observability. Run load and chaos tests before production deployment. Thank you for watching this complete guide to testing Azure Functions. From unit and integration testing to load testing, concurrency, performance, and best practices. If this session helped you with certifications, interviews, or building reliable functions in production, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData. More Azure deep dives are coming soon. Stay connected and keep learning. Thank you. See you in the next video.